Hello everyone. This video lesson is for first year BSc first semester students of food science and nutrition subject. In the paper Human Physiology, the topic of discussion is digestive system. Under that, the digestive system is continued with act of swallowing. In the last classes, we have learned about the structure and function of mouth, tongue, and salivary glands. Now, with the digestion process started in the mouth, the next stage of digestion of food is the act of deglutition. The food, whatever is being crushed and made into a smooth in the mouth with the help of salivary glands, will be given to the next part of digestive tract or gastrointestinal tract is pushing or propel the food into the next part of the digestive system is deglutition. Swallowing or deglutition is the process by which food passes from the mouth through the pharynx and into the esophagus. As simple as it might seem to healthy people, swallowing is actually a very complex action that requires an extremely precise coordination with breathing, since both of these processes share the same entrance of the pharynx. Failure in coordination would result in choking or pulmonary aspiration because pharynx and larynx run together in the throat. ಸೊ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದರೂ ಒಂಚೂರು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆದರೆ ಫುಡ್ ಪೈಪ್ ಒಳಗೆ ಹೋಗೋದ್ರ ಬದಲು ಫುಡ್ ಏನಾದರೂ ಲ್ಯಾರಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಒಳಗೆ ಹೋಗಿದ್ರೆ ಇಟ್ ಮೇ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಅ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್. ಸೊ ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ವಿ ಸೇ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ವೆರಿ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ ದೋ ಇಟ್ ಲುಕ್ಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಸಿಂಪಲ್. Swallowing involves over 20 muscles of the mouth, throat, and esophagus, which are controlled by several cortical areas and by the swallowing centers in the brainstem. The brain communicates with the muscles through several cranial nerves. The process of swallowing is divided into 3 stages: oral phase, pharyngeal phase, and esophageal phase. Now, let us look into the 3 different stages of swallowing. What happens in each stage, or you can call it as mechanism of the act of swallowing. In the phase 1, oral phase, you can observe that in the picture given here, this process is the only voluntary part of the swallowing, and it is under neuro control of several areas of cerebral cortex, including the motor cortex. In this stage, food is moistened with saliva and food bolus is formed with the help of salivary juice. The tongue pushes the bolus to the back of the throat. It starts with lip closure. If the mouth keeps open, the jaw does not have any stability. It becomes very difficult to swallow. The next stage is the pharyngeal stage. This stage shows involuntary, complex, closely coordinated movements in the pharynx that pushes the bolus into the esophagus. This phase lasts for 1 to 2 seconds only. This starts with the stimulation of tactile receptors in the oropharynx. Swallow reflex is initiated. Soft palate lifts to cut off nasal airways. Bolus moves over back tongue and the tongue blocks the oral cavity to prevent the food going to the oral cavity. Epiglottis is pushed backward over larynx. Larynx and ocal folds contract, covering the entry of trachea to protect airways. Respiration temporarily arrested. This is the most important step since entry of food or drink into the lungs may potentially be life threatening. We stop breathing when we swallow at any stage of development. Protective reaction. Upper esophageal sphincter opens to allow passages to the esophagus. The next stage is the esophageal stage of swallowing. Here, the food bolus is propelled down by the esophagus by a movement called peristalsis. This is a wave of muscular contraction that pushes the bolus down the cardia. The larynx moves back to the original position. Here, in the esophagus, there are two types of primary and secondary movements occur in the esophageal peristalsis. This is the peristalsis. You can see in the picture, it is a radially symmetrical contraction and relaxation of the muscles that propagates in a wave down a tube in an anterograde directions. Here, the swallowing or local stimulation of esophagus at any level causes the development of this peristalsis. This consists, as I told you, of a lumen, the hollow tube, obliterating contractions that is for about 4 to 8 centimeter in length, which moves down at a speed of approximately 2 to 4 centimeters per second. Thus, after reaching the esophagus, food is propelled into the stomach by this movement called peristalsis. The strength of peristaltic contraction is proportional to the size of the bolus entering into the esophagus. Gravity plays a little role in this process as its rate of progress along the esophagus is rapid in supine as in the erect position. The esophageal stage for liquid food lasts for 1 to 2 seconds, and for dry food it lasts for 10 seconds. So this is about the act of swallowing. The food from the mouth travels through the pharynx and esophagus to the stomach. Now let us learn about the next part of the digestive system from the mouth is the pharynx. The pharynx is the part of both digestive and respiratory system. Pharynx is about 12 to 14 centimeters in length. Its vertical length and it extends from the base skull to the upper border of upper esophageal sphincter. In the next slide, I will tell you about what is esophageal sphincter when I explain about esophagus. Now, pharynx is a cone-shaped passageway leading from oral and nasal cavities in the head to esophagus and larynx. You can see that in the picture here. The pharynx chamber serves both respiratory and digestive functions. Thick fibers of muscle and connective tissue attach the pharynx to the base of the skull and surrounding structures. Both circular and longitudinal muscles occur in the walls of the pharynx. The circular muscles form constrictions that help push the food to the esophagus and prevent air from being swallowed, while the uh, longitudinal muscles help the same. The pharynx consists of three main divisions. The anterior portion, which lies in connection with the nose, is called nasal pharynx. The back section of the nasal cavity is shown in the picture. The nasal pharynx connects to the second region, the oropharynx, oral part of the mouth, and which is in connection with the pharynx, by means of a passage called isthmus. The oral pharynx begins at the back of the mouth cavity and continues down the throat to the epiglottis by means of a tissue that covers the air passages to the lungs and that channels food to the esophagus. Triangular shaped recesses in the walls of this region house a palatine tonsil. Two masses of lymphatic tissue prone to the infection are these tonsils. The opening of the mouth connecting to the oral part and the nasal regions is extremely beneficial in humans. It allows them to breathe through either the nose or the mouth. And when medically necessary, it allows food to be passed through the esophagus by nasal tubes. The third region is laryngeal pharynx, which begins at the epiglottis and leads down to the esophagus. Its function is to regulate the passage of air to the lungs and food to the esophagus. Duodenal fibers present here lift the walls of the pharynx during the swallowing act, which I have explained already in the act of swallowing. The next part of the digestive tract is the esophagus. It is about 25 centimeters long fibromuscular tube which is lined with the mucous membrane extending from pharynx to the stomach. It consists of muscles that run both longitudinally and circularly, entering into the abdominal cavity via the right crus of the diaphragm at the level of 10th thoracic vertebrae. Now I'll explain you about the esophageal sphincters which I had told you during the act of swallowing. The upper esophageal sphincter is a bundle of muscles which you can see here in the picture at the top of the esophagus. The muscles of upper esophageal sphincter are under conscious control used when breathing, eating, blenching and vomiting. They keep the food and secretions from going down the windpipe. Below that, the lower esophageal sphincter, which is present near to the stomach opening, is a bundle of muscles again at the low end of the esophagus where it meets the stomach. When the lower esophageal sphincter is closed, it prevents acid and stomach contents from traveling backwards from the stomach. The lower esophageal sphincter muscles are not under the voluntary control. Both of them are completely involuntary in their function. What is peristalsis? I told you it's a rhythmic contractions which occur and pushes the food downward in a lumen. Peristalsis that occurs in the esophagus is shown in this picture. As the bolus of the food enters through the esophagus from the pharynx, the muscles of the esophagus contract, constricting the passageway and pushing the bolus down. The muscles after that relax, allowing the passageway to open, and here the lower esophageal sphincter in the stomach in the second picture will relax, allow the food to enter. Soon after the food enter towards the stomach, the lower esophageal sphincter muscles will contract strongly to avoid regurgitation of food. This is about the act of swallowing, the structure and function of pharynx, structure and function of esophagus. Next part of the GIT, that is gastrointestinal tract, is stomach, will be discussed in the next lesson.